In the first act of Shakespeare's Hamlet, Polonius gives this famous advice to his son Laertes: "This above all, to thine own self be true." Now, I have to confess, this is, after all, the season for confessing, that I am hardly a Shakespeare scholar. But you know, he had a way with words. And like many other lines of his poetry, this expression has been popular for centuries. And that's because it expresses a profound truth. We are generally happier, our friendships are more meaningful, and we are more successful in life if we just strive to be true to ourselves. Take the prophet Jonah, for example. We'll read his story on Yom Kippur afternoon. Jonah was called by God to go to a faraway place, Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire. And he was to warn the people there that they had to change their ways or suffer the consequences. But Jonah did not want to fulfill his God-given mission. Perhaps he was afraid. Nineveh was a huge city inhabited by very powerful people. What would they do to him if he tried to criticize their behavior? Perhaps he knew that they would repent and God would forgive them, and he was afraid that they would laugh at him when his prophecies of doom did not come to pass. Perhaps he was afraid of being humiliated for being wrong. But of course, convincing the Ninevites to repent was not really wrong at all. That was his real mission. Whatever the reason, Jonah tries to run away from his destiny, to run away from God, and in a sense, to run away from himself, his true self. He was, after all, a prophet of God, and yet he was trying to do anything but be a prophet of God. I have a special place in my heart, I have to say, for Jonah, because at least twice in my life, I tried to run away from my calling. As most of you know, I grew up in a Reformed Jewish home in Tucson, Arizona. My parents were both involved in the synagogue. My brothers and I attended religious school. We had our bar mitzvahs. We participated in the Reform Movement's youth group. We went to summer camp. You know, we did all the Jewish stuff. We did not keep kosher at home, but we certainly did not eat bacon or ham or shellfish. But then I went off to college, and everything changed. I was away from home for the first time in my life. I attended a small liberal arts school where about a third of the student body was Jewish, but there were no Jewish programs on campus. As a freshman, I was required to live in the dorms and to participate in the cafeteria plan. We had 3 meals a day, and we could eat whatever we wanted off the menu. Now I have to make a second confession tonight. That year of college, I ate bacon and sausage and just about anything else I wanted many, many times. Now, I was on my own, and I could do whatever I pleased. That year was also the first year, believe it or not, that I totally forgot to look at the calendar to see when it was Rosh Hashanah. I completely missed it without realizing it. By Yom Kippur, I had finally looked at a calendar, and I remembered going to a Reformed temple in the evening. But the service there did not really inspire me, so I didn't even bother going back the next day. And I honestly don't remember whether I actually fasted that year or not. Like Jonah, I had basically run away from being Jewish. But then something very odd happened. By the spring, I suddenly found myself missing Judaism. I missed celebrating Jewish holidays. I missed going to services on Shabbat. I wanted to have a place that I could go and talk to Jewish people about Jewish issues and events with other people. And I decided I had to get out of the belly of the whale and transfer to a school that had a Hillel, a Jewish campus organization, that I could get involved in. So I transferred to the University of Arizona and was soon involved in pro-Israel demonstrations, not only coming to Shabbat services, but leading them, organizing programs, performing in an Israeli dance troupe. I know it's hard to believe right now, but I did back then, and even taking courses in Jewish studies. My roommates were conservative Jews who kept kosher, so I learned how to keep a kosher kitchen, buying only kosher meat and separating dairy and meat products and keeping separate dishes. By the end of my undergraduate education, I decided to spend a year in Israel. I had never been to Israel, and I also wanted to learn more about Judaism in a more intensive way. That year, I found I really loved learning the wisdom of our tradition, and I soon realized how very little I had known growing up when I thought I knew so much. By the end of that year in Israel, I started thinking, maybe I should be a rabbi. That's when I once again ran away from my calling, like Jonah. You see, I had always planned on being a lawyer, so I decided to follow through on that plan, and I went to law school in Los Angeles and practiced law there for several years. But this time, at least, I didn't abandon Judaism. I continued to study in my spare time. I was now keeping Shabbat and keeping kosher, and I attended a conservative synagogue regularly. Eventually, though, I became frustrated with being a lawyer, and I took another year off in Israel where I immersed myself in Talmud study and in Jewish law. That was the year I met Diane. She was in cantorial school at HUC, and the first year of the program is in Jerusalem. By the end of that year, I again thought about becoming a rabbi, but I stubbornly decided to go and give the law one more chance. But it was only a few years after that I finally gave up on practicing law. I had not found it fulfilling, and at the same time, I was becoming more and more convinced that I was called to be a rabbi. Fortunately for me, Diane said it was okay for me to go back to school for 5 years. As luck would have it, or maybe it wasn't luck at all, a friend of mine, whom I had known for many years, and he knew my life story pretty well, had in the meantime gotten a PhD in Jewish history. And he was teaching that year at the University of Judaism in Los Angeles. Wouldn't you know it, I ended up taking his class as a student. We were about the same age. The first day I showed up, he said to me, "So, maybe we should call you Jonah." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well," he said, "it sure took you long enough to finally decide to go to rabbinical school. You've been running away from being a rabbi for years now. It was obvious to me that this is where you ought to be." And you know something? He was right. From the day I started rabbinical school, I never had a second thought about being a lawyer. I had truly fallen in love with studying the wisdom of our Jewish tradition, Talmud, Jewish law, theology, Midrash, and of course, the Bible, the prayers in our prayer books, and the Passover Haggadah. I realized in rabbinical school that most Jews would not necessarily be so excited about studying Talmud or the argumentation and minutiae in Jewish law. Lawyers usually get excited about that stuff, but it's kind of like beer. It's an acquired taste. What most Jews are familiar with and would appreciate learning more about is the Bible itself. Who wrote those words? Why were they written? What do they mean to the author who wrote them? And what do they mean to the people who read them? And most importantly, what can we learn from them today? And the same questions can be explored with our prayers in our prayer books and with the words in the Passover Haggadah that is known so well in almost every Jewish family. I loved learning about all these things. But I have to tell you, I was a bit anxious when I first graduated. Had I, after all, made the right decision for me and for my family? Sure, I loved rabbinical school, but I also enjoyed law school, yet I was not happy as a lawyer. Would I be happy as a rabbi? So this is now my 26th Rosh Hashanah service as a rabbi at Beth Yeshurun, and I would not trade this job for anything. I love teaching. I love learning from you. When people ask me a question, I love to look up an answer and then discuss it with them. As you know, in Judaism, we have a religion that doesn't have a simple answer to anything. We love to argue. So, or maybe we say discuss. There's always many possible answers, and that's why I like discussing it with people. I love giving sermons, and I often try to find something new to learn myself when I'm preparing for them. I love officiating at weddings, at baby namings, at bar mitzvahs, and even being there for families at funerals. I'm glad to have the opportunity to make hospital visits. In short, I love this congregation, all of you. I did not expect to run a successful class for people who are seeking to convert to Judaism and join the Jewish people, but it has been one of the most personally rewarding aspects of my role here at Beth Yeshurun. I also enjoy the opportunity to represent the Jewish community in interfaith programs and dialogues. Now, I don't usually talk about the story of my life, but in this case, I wanted to give a personal testimonial to 3 very important messages that we can learn from the prophet Jonah and maybe also from the great English bard. The first is, don't run away from the mission that only you can accomplish. Don't hide in some big fish's belly because you're afraid to take your God-given talents and go out and make a difference in the world. Every one of us has a unique gift or a set of gifts that God has given us. Every one of us can find something in the world that only we can fix, something that lights up our passions, something that calls to us, that seems to beckon us to respond. But too often we're like Jonah, trying to run away. Perhaps we're afraid, like Jonah, what others think. Perhaps we're attracted to some other path because it seems easier or superficially more satisfying. Don't be afraid. Don't listen to that siren song trying to distract you. Follow your heart. Now, I'm not suggesting that we necessarily abandon a successful livelihood. A lawyer can use his or her talents in law to accomplish many good things, even while she or he earns a living, and most lawyers do just that. I know a doctor who comes home every night, and when he is asked what she did that day, she can honestly say, "I saved a few lives." That's a blessing. An artist can say that she touched someone's life, inspired someone to do or think something new and wonderful. An accountant can say that he kept a company's books honest or found new ways for a company to save money. A businessman can say he employs people who otherwise would have no way to raise a family. And your calling may be something you do outside of your earning a living. But whatever your calling is, do it, and be the best whatever it is that you can be. The second message is, don't run away from God and from Judaism. Let's all try to do a little more this year for the Jewish people and our own Jewish souls. In that freshman year in college, I learned a great deal academically. But more important than that, I learned how important Judaism is to me. I only realized that when I had run away from it. Jonah tried to first run away also. And when the ship he was on nearly shattered in a storm, he went to the cabin below to go to sleep. But then he readily admitted later to the pagan sailors that he was a Jew who worshiped the one God. And when he was in the belly of the fish, he called out to that God and asked for forgiveness. Our faith, our traditions, the wisdom of our sages, these are precious gifts to us. We so often take them for granted. Don't wait to be in the belly of a fish. Seize any opportunity you can to learn more, and I guarantee you, your life will be enriched more than you can imagine. And the prophet's third message, it is never too late to repent, to change our ways, to change the course of our life, to return to God, to Judaism, to our personal mission or calling that only we can accomplish. Jonah repented, and he went on his mission. The Ninevites repented, and they were saved. We can, too. There's a famous story that is told of the great Hasidic Rabbi Zusia, who was dying, and all his students were gathered around praying and crying, and then Zusia himself began to cry, and one of his students said to him, "Rav Zusia, why are you crying? You have lived a righteous life. You have raised up students. You will be received into the world to come for sure. And Rav Zuzia answered his students, I'm crying because I now understand that if God will ask me, Zuzia, why weren't you like Moses? I'll have a ready answer. Holy One, you didn't give me the potential you gave to Moses. If the Almighty will ask me, Zuzia, why weren't you like Maimonides? I will also have a ready answer. Eternal One, you neither gave me the gifts nor did you place me in a position to be similar to Maimonides. But the Master of the universe will not ask me these questions, he said. He's going to ask Zuzia, why weren't you Zuzia? Why didn't you fulfill the task that only Zuzia could have fulfilled? It is of this question that I am in dread. And if I will be asked it, what should I say? What will we say when this question is asked of us? May we be brave enough this high holy days to ask ourselves this question, and may we be inspired to find in ourselves the mission that we alone can fulfill. And may we have the courage to pursue our mission with all of the talents that God has given us, so that when we are asked the question, we'll have a worthy answer. L'shana tova tikatevu v'techatemu, may we be inscribed and sealed for a good new year.
So I want to say one thing, how blessed we are at Beth Yeshurun that he didn't run away. But you know, "26 years ago, Rabbi Rosen was wise enough, along with the search committee, to hire Rabbi Morgen to come here to Beth Yeshurun. And some of you may know that Rabbi Morgen will be retiring next summer. But here's the good news. The good news is Rabbi Morgen is still going to continue to teach for us and lead our nationally known conversion program and still be an active part of our community along with his extraordinary wife, Cantor Dorff. So I know that Steve and Diane will still be part of our family for many, many years to come. But I know you agree with me how blessed we have been here at Beth Yeshurun for now over 26 years and for many, many more years to come. We thank you, Rabbi Morgen, for your teaching tonight and for many years of teaching.